So welcome everybody. I guess the weather has cooperated for today. My name is Joan Mahoney and I am the Field Operations Manager for the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. I'm also the ALB Asian Longhorn Beetle Program Manager. I'm happy to be here today to help kick off this wonderful announcement. I want to thank all the men and women who have spent the last 23 years, and there have been literally hundreds of people who have assisted on this program. Some of them are here today that have worked to help survey their trees and help to make ALB history here. I also want to comment on the fact that for the past 23 years, this has probably been one of the longest running cooperative programs where we have had the USDA, New York City Parks, New York State DEC, New York State Ag and Markets, and the U.S. Forest Service. And we've all worked together to help bring us here to this day. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Samantha Simon from the USDA APHIS. She is the Executive Director. She's in charge of Domestic Plant Pest Programs and Emergency Response Program. Previously, she has served as the USDA Senior Invasive Species Coordinator. She worked with numerous federal agencies and partners on invasive species issues. She also previously served as the USDA's liaison to the National Invasive Species Council, supporting Secretary Perdue's in his role as council member. So, Samantha Simon?
Thank you. Joan did some homework on me because I did not give her any of that. I gave her my title, that was it. So good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us. It is a pleasure to be here today in Brooklyn. This is where it all began. 23 years ago, a Brooklyn resident discovered a strange-looking beetle, and we're so glad that this observant person reported it. That discovery marked the first U.S. detection of the Asian longhorn beetle, also known as ALB for short. The ALB is a wood-boring, tree-killing insect that normally lives in China and on the Korean Peninsula, but in the United States, it's an invasive, destructive pest. The USDA and the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets responded immediately. And we knew that if this invasive pest became established in the U.S., it would threaten forest resources that were valued at billions of dollars, along with many industries that the forest supports, such as timber, recreation, and maple syrup production. So today, here we are in Brooklyn, 23 years later, to celebrate our victory against this serious threat. Today, we're declaring the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens free of ALB. Thank you. And really, that applause does belong to all of those folks that have worked so hard on this program. So I thank all of you because we can now celebrate this important accomplishment together. It's been a long, hard road, and people have worked tirelessly to make this achievement a reality. As we celebrate today, I'd like to look at the larger picture. Since that first detection here in Brooklyn, ALB has also been found in 5 states. Those states are Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Ohio, and of course, New York. New York has been especially hard hit. ALB populations have been found and then eradicated from Manhattan, Staten Island, Islip, and now Brooklyn and Queens. USDA and our partners have also eradicated ALB from Illinois, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts, and Stone Lick and Monroe townships in Ohio. We continue to work towards eradication on Long Island, in Worcester, Massachusetts, and near Cincinnati, Ohio. Did I say it right? So close. From the beginning, the ALB program has been a cooperative effort between USDA, state departments of agriculture, academia, and homeowners. Together, we've carried out a coordinated program. It includes inspecting trees for signs of infestation, removing infested and suspect trees, and prohibiting the movement of potentially infested items like firewood and wood tree trimmings from the quarantine areas. The eradication strategy hasn't been easy, but it works, and that's why we're here today. Our efforts have paid off and will continue to pay off. By eradicating this insect, when and where it's found in the United States. We're protecting property values, markets for the nursery industry, the maple syrup and sugar industry, timber values and woodlots, wildlife that depends on healthy forests and trees, and the appearance and livability of neighborhoods. So each infestation that we eradicate is a big win for communities across the country and for U.S. agriculture and natural resources. And each eradication is a shining example of federal, state, and community cooperation. USDA has a long-standing relationship with all of its partners, and nowhere else is that more evident than in our relationships with the ALB partners in New York, Massachusetts, and Ohio. As we carry out our tree inspections, we've also had to call on the help of the community members to give us access to their properties, and that has not always been easy. I understand there's been strong support for these efforts, and we are grateful. We don't always experience this type of cooperation when an invasive or foreign pest is discovered, and we never take it for granted. The close collaboration that we have enjoyed with all of our partners has made today possible. So thank you to all of you for what you've done to help us protect American agriculture and natural resources. You have brought us to this day and to this declaration that Brooklyn and Queens are officially free of ALB.
Thank you, Samantha. Our next speaker is Christopher Logue. Christopher Logue is the Director of Plant Industry with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. He is also the state's regulatory official and the designated lead on the Asian Longhorn Beetle program. Chris also serves as the co-chair of the New York State Invasive Species Council and has worked to strengthen regulations to keep unwanted pests out of New York. Christopher Logue.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joan, for the very kind introduction. It's wonderful to be here today to highlight this very important event. And I'm especially pleased to be here representing our Commissioner, Richard Ball. He sends his regrets for not being able to be here. I'm especially thankful that it wasn't yesterday when it poured rain. Had a fantastic change in the weather here for this event, which we're all very pleased to have happen. I think the previous speakers have talked a little bit about collaboration already, and I think this is really a very important point for me to make here, is that the collaboration that we've had for all these years on the Asian Longhorn beetle here in New York City, and the cooperators being USDA, New York State DEC, the Forest Service, and New York City Parks, working together was just key to ever getting to this day and getting to this accomplishment. Everybody here deserves great congratulations for all of the hard work. And we also should make note that there are many people who worked on this project who've moved on to other things and worked on other projects around the country. This truly has been a great program that has trained a lot of plant health professionals in many, many agencies. As part of the eradication program, the collaborators took an aggressive role on controlling the pest. We did inspections, survey, and implemented quarantines around the area to contain the pest. Inspectors also worked with local tree companies, landscapers, and garden centers to train and educate them about ALB. That puts more eyes on the ground, more people looking for the pest. It was a great accomplishment. This collaborative and comprehensive approach has been ongoing for many years, and that long-term commitment has culminated in this announcement today. Another important note to make here, though, is it's not just the regulators and the officials here today that made this happen. We've also had fantastic partners in the residents of Brooklyn and Queens who've been helpful, taken an active role, and in many instances opened up their properties and allowed us to do the control and inspection work that we've all been, that we've needed to do to get to this day. We're all part of the solution, and it takes each of us to be vigilant to control the spread of invasive species. This is a shining example of success in this area. Congratulations again to all the teams on the ground who worked on this effort, all the researchers who helped us with the science, and again, most importantly, to the folks here in New York City who supported us through these 23 years. Thank you so much.
Have to get a little taller for me. So our next speaker is Steve Zahn. He's the Regional Director of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Region 2's office, and that covers the 5 boroughs of New York City, where he oversees all regional DEC programs. Steve has served with the DEC for 25 years in Region 2. Prior to moving to the regional directorship, he served as the National Resource Supervisor, overseeing regional programs under DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife, Marine Resources, and Lands and Forests. Steve Zahn.
Thank you, Joan. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here on this great occasion, representing Commissioner Basil Sagos, who's unable to be here today. And I have to say, I felt this dark outfit was appropriate for the event, because while it's celebratory, I mean, from the ALB perspective, it's a bit like a funeral. So this is what I went with. So as we wish a fond farewell to the Asian longhorn beetle, my send-off wish is, don't let the door hit you in the carapace on the way out. I'm glad that worked. I've sweated that one out all day. I knew this crowd would get it. So with this declaration and following the previous triumphs we've had in Manhattan and Staten Island, the announcement that we're ALB free in New York City is just tremendous. But of course, more than 2 decades of incredibly diligent work, every host tree inspected multiple times, thousands of trees removed and replanted, hundreds of thousands of trees treated. It's truly an awesome effort at many $millions of cost, but inarguably well worth it. The beetle was destructive here in New York City, but just imagine if that pest had gotten to the rest of the state. Now, during prime leaf peeping time, imagine a New York without maple trees and how drab it would really look. And as everyone has said before, and you can't state enough, what an incredible collaborative effort this has really been. Cooperative in every sense of the word. City, state, federal partners, NGOs, local residents. You can't get better than that. And that's what it took to make this work. We at DEC have just been proud to play a part on this team. Here in Brooklyn and Queens, our role was more as a support or outreach, while Ag and Markets and APHIS and Forest Service and New York Parks did a lot of the heavy lifting. But I do have to think back fondly to the time when we had an opportunity at DEC to really get our hands dirty on this exercise as co-lead in the earlier Herculean effort to close down the Beetle Bridge between New Jersey and New York City. For those of you who don't know, Prall's Island in the middle of the Arthur Kill was suspected as providing that leaping point between New York and New Jersey, and the pest could move back and forth. So that gateway was important for us to shut down. So if you'll pardon a pun, once we realized this, the partner agencies literally swarmed over that 84-acre island, and in just a few weeks, removed 3,000 host trees, closing that gate. Just DEC alone, we put in 200 staff days in about a 12-workday period. That's how much resources we wanted to throw at it to make this a very effective effort. So we did that. It was challenging and intensive, but it was successful, and that's really the important part. At DEC, ALB awareness, outreach, and education will continue to be a high focus for us through our Bureau of Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, represented here today by Justin Perry. Thank you for being here, Justin. Mindful that firewood movement is a common way of introducing the beetle into new areas, we've been conducting annual surveys in specific campgrounds and recreational areas to try and identify whether it's been moved into that location. We've also launched a pool survey asking New York State residents to check their pool filters for the presence of ALB. The citizen science survey tool has been very popular with the public, and it did lead to a significant ALB find and a quarantine expansion out on Long Island. So we're going to continue this education and sentinel monitoring work into the future. We've had great success here in New York City, but the beetle is still out there. We're still fighting it on Long Island, as I said, and there's always a chance it could find its way into the state elsewhere, so we will remain on the lookout. I'd like to again thank all of our partner agencies across government for all their efforts to save New York's incredible forest resources from this pest. DEC has been proud to have contributed in any way, and I thank in particular DEC's forestry program, Rob Davies, our state forester, and his dedicated staff in Albany, and locally, our past and present regional foresters, Jeff Speech and Tim Wenskis, who are also with us here today. So again, congratulations to all for this well-fought battle and this hard-earned victory.
Our next guest speaker is Assemblyman Joseph Lentil. Assemblyman Lentil's, his district is in Asian Longhorn Beetle, or what was the prior Asian Longhorn Beetle territory. He has always supported New York City parks and urban forestry, and it's a pleasure to have him here today.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I just want all of you to know that it seems like I started my political career along with the Longhorn Beetle. It was over 25 years ago that my home on Russell Street was visited by Ag and Markets, the U.S. Department of Forestry, as well as other agencies to try and help get access to many homes. But I have to say that this is really a celebratory day because you guys learned from the experience that we had to go through in McGoldrick Park, where we lost every single maple tree in that park. And for those of you who don't remember, there was a young woman at the time, not so young, from the Forestry Service, the United States Forestry Service, who promised and delivered on her promise to replant all of the trees that we lost at McGoldrick Park. And I just want to mention her for those of you who might remember her from the federal government. Her name was Sharon Ossenbergen, and she was a fabulous woman who deserves a great deal of credit, as do you all who are here today, from DEC, from the Forestry Services, from the Parks Department, Marty Marr, and all of you folks who cooperated and got people into homes so that this beetle could be extinguished. I know how difficult it is because people don't want to open up their doors and let you in. But we did it, we paved the way, and now we got to get rid of all the rest of the Longhorn beetles together. Thank you very much.
So our next guest speaker is Deputy Commissioner Liam Kavanagh from New York City Parks Department. He's a lifelong New Yorker. He is born in Manhattan. He was raised in the Bronx and now resides in Brooklyn. First Deputy Commissioner Kavanagh started with the parks in 1981. He has served as the Director of Brooklyn Forestry, the Deputy Chief of Operations both in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, and now he's the Chief, he was appointed as the Deputy Commissioner in 2002. But more important, he's one of the few people who have been with the Asian Longhorn Beetle program since the day the first beetle call came in, when Tom Stofka and Harry Rother went out on the call to go check the tree that Ingram Carner had called in. So he has been with the program since its inception. He has supported us and probably been one of the biggest cheerleaders to keep it going and to do the work that we needed to do. So it's a pleasure to introduce First Deputy Commissioner Liam Kavanagh.
Thank you, and welcome to beautiful McCarran Park here in the Garden Spot of America, Brooklyn, USA. And it's only fitting that we're holding this celebration here at the Tom Stofka Garden. Tom was a great parking, and at the time the Asian Longhorn Beetle was discovered just a few blocks from here on McGinnis Boulevard. He was the director of Brooklyn Forestry, and believe me, Tom threw himself into the battle against the Asian Longhorn Beetle. And my only regret is that he's not here today to share our celebration, though I know wherever he is enjoying today as much as all of us are. But it was a really bleak time for forestry in New York City when that pest was discovered. For years, it just seemed to spread further and further from the point where it was discovered. Brooklyn, Queens, the quarantine kept growing. It moved to Manhattan. It moved to Staten Island. It didn't look like we would ever be able to overcome that pest. And I actually thought we would have to learn to live with it, which was a really horrible thing to think about when you consider that half of the hardwood trees in New York were susceptible to that pest. So it was a really horrible thing to consider. But it's a great, great story, as you've heard from the speakers. It was a tremendous collaboration at the federal, state, and city level, the USDA, APHIS, and the Forest Service, the state DEC, and Agriculture and Markets, the Parks Department, and our many partners throughout the city, because we didn't do it by ourselves. But through persistence, through constant vigilance, through making very difficult decisions to remove, what looked to be very great, healthy trees, because they posed a threat to other great, healthy trees, we were able to reduce the threat and eventually eliminate the beetle. Here in this park alone, McCarran Park, we lost 121 mature trees. It represented 60% of the canopy at the time. And it was a really shocking thing to come to these parks, or McGolrick Park, as Assemblymember Lenthal mentioned, and see them after all those trees were gone. Trees that had been there for generations, that people had took for granted as being part of the landscape, part of their communities, were no longer there. And that's one of the great parts of this story that I think we need to remember and celebrate. If you look around this community now, it has a larger, healthier, more diverse urban forest than it did before the Asian Longhorn Beetle was discovered. And that was because of the commitment made by all levels of government to restore the forest in this community and in communities all over the city that were affected by the Asian Longhorn Beetle. So yes, it was a severe threat, and yes, it killed lots of important trees all over the city. But thanks to our work, as the one person I want to acknowledge, many hundreds of people in the Parks Department really poured their hearts and soul into battling the Asian Longhorn Beetle. But I have to acknowledge Fiona Watt, who was the Assistant Commissioner for Forestry and Horticulture for many years, and who was here when the pest was discovered, and boy, did she keep us focused on that particular issue. In many ways, at all times, and I think our success, the success of the Parks Department, is due primarily to the work of Fiona Watt. I just want to say that and acknowledge her for that. But, and as she pointed out to me before the ceremony started, when you think about it, where the pest was found and what it really threatened, it was found in Central Park. And that historic landscape was really at risk of the Asian Longhorn Beetle, but thankfully it was found in time. It was contained into one area, the Hallett Cove Sanctuary, and it didn't spread beyond that. But think of what it could have done to Central Park. Think of what it could have done to Prospect Park, because the quarantine was right at the edge of Prospect Park and Prospect Heights. And in, important parks in Queens as well, were really threatened by this pest. And if it weren't for the work of all of the people here and many thousands of others who contributed to it, our parks could look very different than they are today. But the one lesson that I certainly learned, if you look around this park today, if you look around the streets of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, which are very different today than they were in 1999 after all those trees were removed, is that despite what we may inflict upon nature, it's unbelievably resilient, and it responds beautifully. And that's what we're here to really celebrate, that these great trees are still with us and will be with us for generations to come. So thank everybody for everything you did to make this happen, and say goodbye to the Asian Longhorn Beetle.
Now the fun part. So the United States Department of Agriculture, together with the State Department of Agriculture and Markets, is appreciative of the partnership and cooperation that New York City Parks and the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens have offered to the Asian Longhorn Beetle Eradication Program, and for helping to protect the trees in the state of New York and our nation from the invasive Asian Longhorn Beetle. We would like to recognize first, the Borough of Brooklyn and Commissioner Martin Mayer. Thank you. And the Borough of Queens and the Commissioner Michael Dockett. Thank you. So we're very happy that after the many years of hard work and the efforts of everyone involved, Brooklyn and Queens is finally done with the Asian Longhorn Beetle. But I think, as you've heard from the other speakers, work remains, and we must remain vigilant against this invasive pest. So thank you again for your support, and thank you for coming out today.
So before we finish, we have one more task to do, and that's to leave McCarran Park with one more tree planted. So if you all join me in a tree planting right behind you, we can conclude today's events. Thank you.
Gotta look up at the cameras.
Soil?
And we'll do 3, 2, 1 toss. Smush into the center. We'll do it a couple of times.
No, more
Heads up, please. Heads up.
Okay, everybody ready? 3, 2, 1, toss.
All
Get
right.
another shovelful. All right, 3, 2, 1, toss. One more time for good measure.
Trying to make it work here.
Well, he's the commissioner. Tells us what to do.
Everybody's ready? Looking up. 3, 2, 1, toss. All right, now it's out of title work. So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I remember you got us the first $2 million in the state for replanting. Yeah, no, I did. It was great. Most of the trees on the streets were planted first because of that money. So, and I also remember your hand was super important. Remember that?
It was a fun.
Yep, every event.